Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited today about our guest, Mr. Jeeva Sam. Jeeva Sam and his wife, Sulojana, mentor married couples for breakdown to breakthrough in as little as 10 weeks guaranteed. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about his story and see where we go. Jeeva, thank you and welcome to the channel.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Awesome. It's really exciting to have you on today because I think you'll have lots of great relationship advice, both in the marital sense and then as well as work relationship, friendships, anything like that. I think there's a lot of valuable insight here that you can share with us. So please do tell us a little bit about yourself and so that we can get to know who you are.
Okay, all right. So I was actually born in India, almost at the southern tip of India. And when I was 18 years old, we moved to Canada. My dad was already here for a year, so my mom, my sister, and my brother, all of us moved here. And I was basically university age at that time, so I went straight to university,
Okay.
which was quite a jump from coming from one country to another, and
Right.
then the regular family culture to university culture,
Yeah.
especially a residence culture,
Yeah. Yeah.
was quite a shock. But
Wow.
got
Yeah.
used to it, and then my goal always had been to go into theology to become a pastor. And
Okay.
so once I finished my basic degree, then I went on to my divinity degree, and then moved to another part of Canada. We live in Ontario, so I moved to Saskatchewan, which is about a 3-hour flight away,
Okay.
and then spent the first part of my ministry almost 20 years there,
Wow.
and then moved back here. So we now live in the Niagara region of Canada, and as you said in your introduction, since I retired from active congregational ministry,
Hmm.
my wife Sulojana and I, we've been doing marriage mentorship.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. So what was it like leaving India and settle in Canada?
Okay. Well, it's like anything new.
Uh-huh.
Uh, in those days, we didn't have the internet, so you couldn't research a lot, watch live webcams and that kind of stuff to get a feel for where you're going.
Uh-huh.
So you basically went on what what Dad told us, because Dad was the only one that in the family that had been to Canada and he was living here. Plus, you get some hearsay stuff from others and so on. So you kind of had an idea that
Yeah.
it was going to be very different from India.
Uh-huh.
Like where I grew up in India, it was about 7 degrees north of the equator,
Oh,
which
wow.
means it was like really really hot
Yeah.
all the time.
Uh-huh.
So you basically had heat and then the rainy season, the
Mm.
monsoons. So that was the only thing we knew. And so coming to Canada, you hear about
Yeah.
this thing called winter.
Uh-huh.
You see these beautiful pictures of snow,
Right.
and and you think, oh, that'd be so neat. But you don't realize, what it's like to experience snow.
Yeah.
Like we'd actually no grid whatsoever for cold.
Uh-huh.
Like we used to put sweaters on when it got down to the 60s,
Oh,
if it ever did. Even at
right.
night, never really got that cold.
Mhm.
And then to come here where it went down to 0 centigrade, which is like freezing,
Yeah.
was quite a shock. And even below that, my father actually was in northern Ontario at the time, and the
Uh-huh.
northern part of Ontario is a little bit like North Dakota, Montana, that kind
Wow.
of weather.
Yeah.
So we're talking minus 25, 30, 40
Uh-huh.
temperatures. So yeah,
Wow.
it was quite an adjustment.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's crazy the acclimation that our body goes through, not knowing that your whole life and then kind of going to that. So when I was in the army, I was stationed in upstate New York. So up in the Watertown, New York area, right on the border of Alexandria Bay. I cannot remember what the Canadian town was on the other side, but the legal drinking age at the time was 19 in Canada, and so I was 19, and I was always there with my friends. But the cold was just something so out of the like it was not normal.
yeah,
For the very first time, experienced what frozen nostril hairs felt like walking out in negative 20, 30-degree weather. It was insane. And I grew up in the DC area, so we had snow, we had
yeah,
winter, but not that type of winter.
yeah.
Totally, totally different. So even
No,
acclimating from there, so I can only imagine what it was like for you living in India most of your young life and going to that type of temperature.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you and your wife. I know you have a very amazing tale to tell about that, and I would love to kind of get right into that and tell us about your history and how that led you to where you are now with your mentorship program that you guys have.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I was 18 when I came, so which means I'm still very much steeped in Indian culture.
Uh huh.
And so you can take the Indian out of Canada, India, but you can't take, the whatever the expression is. You cannot take the Indian out of the boy, right? That's right. They can take the boy out of India, but you can't take the India out of the boy, right? That's basically, where I was. And so I, even though I'm living in Canada,
Hmm.
culturally, I'm getting used to Canadian culture, but still my thinking process,
Yeah.
everything is still very much, Indian.
Yeah. Yes.
And so in the Indian culture, basically, when it comes time for you to get married, you rely on your parents' judgment,
Hmm.
to basically find you a suitable life partner. And so that's why, like most of us have probably heard the expression arranged marriage.
Hmm.
And so arranged marriage very simply means, your parents do the arranging.
Yeah.
You still have a say in it. Like like my wife and I, we both, either one of us could have exercised a veto,
Right.
like the president, and basically made sure it didn't go through. But we didn't have to worry about, going through the dating process,
Hmm.
and trying to find, who was a suitable match. Culturally, it was ingrained in you
Yeah.
that when your parents found somebody for you, they had done all the homework. It was going to work, and you just had to make it work. Like
Wow.
that was the mindset with which you went into it.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I'm 25 years old
Uh huh.
this by this time in 1983, and our family is going back to India for a holiday
Uh huh.
after actually not being back there since we moved in '76. And so my parents just said to me, "Hey, while we're here for holidays, would you like us to look for a connection for you?" That again is an Indian term.
Uh huh.
When parents say we'll look for a connection for you, that means they're trying to get you married off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got
And
it.
so, yeah, so if any Indian man tells you, "I'm going to look for a connection for you," you run away.
Okay.
So I said, "Yeah, sure. Like I'm open to it." Yeah. Well, all the time that I was in Canada, I didn't really get too much into the dating scene, and
Hmm.
because in some ways, I guess I knew that at some stage I would probably go back home and get married,
Okay.
and so it was not a priority for me. Also, wherever I was, like it's not like I had a lot of options, to go out and date and so on.
Right.
So anyway, so I said sure. So my dad had, before we left, he'd actually corresponded with a marriage broker. So my marriage broker basically, go is a go between the groom's family and the bride's family. So he has a list. In this case, it was a man. There are
Hmm.
women as well who do it.
Hmm.
So he has a list of all the parents who have said, "We want a bride for our son,
Okay.
and here are some of the things that we're looking for." So the requirements could be a certain height,
Hmm.
a certain complexion,
Oh wow.
educational background,
Huh.
a certain kind of qualification in terms of work,
Huh.
and obviously good character and all those kind of things. And in our case, the faith was very very important
Hmm.
because I'm already a pastor,
Hmm.
and so I had to marry within the faith, otherwise it's not likely going to work out, right?
Yeah.
So they gave a list, and in the meantime, the broker also has a list from parents of young women,
Hmm.
for whom they're trying to find a match. And so they're basically saying, this is our daughter, and we're looking for a man.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of an Indian thing, maybe, that the man has to be taller than the woman,
Uh-huh.
and this kind of qualification. So sometimes somebody will say, we're looking to marry our daughter off to a doctor,
Uh-huh.
or an engineer or some particular profession.
Right.
So this broker basically looks at both the lists,
Uh-huh.
and at any given time he's looking to see which of these seems to have more check marks
Okay.
in common.
Wow.
Yeah. And so by the time we got to India, this man came to my dad and said, I think I found a match for you,
Yeah.
connection for your son. And so they get all the details, and my dad basically says to me, "You know what, this sounds like a good connection, good match for you."
Wow.
And so we basically arranged a time to go and meet the family,
Yeah.
and meet her.
Uh-huh.
Now, a lot of times in the Indian tradition, at that time, today things have changed. At that time, it quite often it was not even that important for the prospective husband and wife to meet.
Oh, wow.
You know, because in some ways, like your parents have made the decision
Uh-huh.
that you were going to work out. You'd seen each other's pictures, so it was just a matter of seeing in the flesh.
Yeah.
And in many cases, you didn't really have a chance to like talk to that person even, let alone get to know them at any kind of level. But I basically put a little stipulation that we needed to have some time to
Hmm.
talk to each other, in
Yeah.
addition to talking as families.
Uh-huh.
So after a while, very reluctantly, actually, her father was not, too crazy about that idea. But he said, okay, Canadians, these guys are different. So, so let's give them a few minutes. And so they were very, very generous in giving us about 15 minutes
Okay.
to get to know each other.
Wow.
And so
Speed
basically,
dating.
so yeah, speed dating, yeah. So my job, basically, my mission, actually, I kind of went in with this mission, was basically explain to her what life in Canada was going to be like for her.
Ah.
Because if she was to get married in India, like we were middle class, upper middle class maybe, and so you always had somebody doing a lot of chores for you.
Hmm.
So you had like
Hmm.
servants coming just to do the basic cleaning and even some cooking and stuff.
Right.
So I had to basically let her know that when you come to Canada, nobody's doing any of that for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's you and me, babe.
Yeah. I love
and
it.
and I did check with her to see if she knew how to cook.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I knew how to cook. By that time, I'd been on my own, so I was fine
Yeah.
cooking. But I just thought, let me check with her. She lied and said yes. But
Oh, she lied. Okay.
well, she said to me afterwards, I knew that, like I'm not coming with you to Canada in three
Right.
days because yeah, we get married. I had to wait for my visa. So I figured I had a few months to learn how to
Smart
cook.
lady.
So, so by the time I came there, I would be
Yeah.
cooking. So I gave you the right
Yeah.
answer, So,
I love it.
yeah. And also to explain to her, like, what it's like to be the wife of a pastor.
Hmm.
Because, like working in the church, the full time ministry
Right.
is very different from a 9 to 5 job.
Hmm.
And so I had to explain a little bit of that to her, and then just find a little bit about about her interests and what questions she had. She didn't actually have a lot of questions for me.
Okay.
Asked about Canada
Yeah.
actually a little bit, and again, the best thing I could tell her is I cannot really explain it to you, but you have to experience it.
Exactly.
Yeah, once you come here and you love it. It's a peaceful country. It's a very quiet country compared to India. Like the population of Canada at that time was like 20 million, 23 million, something like
Hmm.
that, and India was not quite a billion
Hmm.
yet. But in India, it's wall to wall people.
Wow. Yeah.
Whereas here, you're going to be by yourself. So I gave her as much information as I
Hmm.
could, but we both, felt that, like there was a connection between
Yeah.
us. Yeah, yeah. And so I still, and maybe because I was used to life in Canada, uh, they wanted me to say like yes or
Uh,
no right after, and I couldn't. I felt like I need to take some
okay.
time. And part of it, I think, was just the thought of all of a sudden, it's like, hey, if I say yes, like this is a lifelong commitment I'm making,
Exactly.
and am I ready? On the one hand, I'm ready, but I had to take my
Hmm.
time. So I took a couple of days, kind of, prayed about it, felt at peace about it, and then said yes. And within a matter of days, from that point onwards, like in less than 2 weeks, we were married.
Wow. And a very elaborate wedding, right? In India, I believe that it's a very elaborate type wedding.
Yeah, yeah, very different. Now, the one good thing about India is everything can get arranged in a hurry.
Okay.
So there are a number of caterers. My dad knew one of the guys, and so he arranged a caterer very quickly.
Wow.
And then basically your whole family, extended family, your neighbors all help. They all chip in, and before you know it, they put up like a temporary kind of a
Hmm.
canopy, where you have the wedding ceremony, like the feast and so on. The ceremonies in the
Yeah.
church, and so the tradition in India is after the ceremony in the church, then the wife's family first of all puts on a feast,
Uh-huh.
and then from there, husband and wife, go to the groom's place, and then there's a reception they call it, which is actually another
Okay.
meal, that day, and the next day, just the immediate families all get together, so you have a third meal. So you pretty well pig out, three times in less than 24
Hmm.
hours.
Wow.
And so it's a lot of
Yeah.
celebration. But in India, everything is very family
Uh-huh.
oriented. And so, like even the marriage is not just two people coming together, which is the way we stress it in North
Hmm.
America. and many other countries and cultures. But in India, it's really two families coming together.
Right.
So you really want to get to know each other's
Yeah.
families as much as you could. And I think at that point, I had about 8 days left before I had to come back to
Okay.
Canada. So we had 8 glorious days together. We went on a little
Yeah.
honeymoon and got to know each other a little bit.
Oh,
And then it was time to say bye and
and that's
come and wait until the visa got
uh-huh.
approved.
Okay, so you left and she stayed until visa was approved. And how long did that take?
So that took
Okay.
6 months. So she actually had 6 months to learn how to cook.
I love it. And was she a fantastic cook by the time she made it to Canada?
You know what? I wouldn't have known
Oh,
that she didn't know how to cook. I just noticed that she had a recipe book
uh-huh.
with her all
Yeah.
the time. But then
Yeah.
again, like that's nothing
Right.
unusual. Now in India, that's very unusual, by the way,
Oh,
because hardly anybody, cooks from a recipe book. Like I remember my mom asking my mom to teach me how to cook,
mhm.
and so it's like, Mom, where's your
Yeah.
recipe? What
No,
recipe?
just a
Okay, watch me and take
exactly.
notes.
A pinch here, a pinch there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. What's a pinch? How many milliliters
Yeah.
is that? It's just a pinch.
Just a pinch until you know it tastes right.
Yeah. So no, she did a great job, and of course, I had to kind of teach her a little bit about how to use Canadian appliances and so on because it's very
Uh-huh.
different from what she had in
Okay.
India. But between the two of us, we did great. We never
Yeah.
starved, never got sick on each other's
Nice.
cooking, and
That's important. All right. Well, so then how did it work out for you? She's now in Canada with you 6 months later, and you start your married life together in a different country. It's foreign to her. She now knows
yeah,
how to cook and she's learning how to use the utensils, but how is her life assimilating and you're both now kind of getting to know each other even more on a deeper level in a different country
yeah,
together. So how was all that?
yeah, yeah. The adjustment was very, very tough on
Mhm.
her because not only did she move from India to Canada, but the part of Canada that I was living in is in a province called
Right.
Saskatchewan, which is like the
Mhm.
prairies, so like Iowa, like that kind of a country. And so we're right smack in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a small town of 300 people on a good day when the wind is blowing right. And so, so really, like that's part of the shock. On top of that, she comes here in the winter. So it's like the minus 30, 35-degree
Wow.
weather. So she leaves behind the plus 35 and plus
Yeah.
40 to come to minus 35
Oh my
centigrade.
gosh.
And so, yeah, so it's a huge shock weather-wise. And so you don't go out too much. You only go when I'm going out somewhere. Now, the saving grace, this is really an incredible story, is that in that small town of 300 people, there were two other Indian
Oh,
families.
nice.
And both Indian families, both wives, had come to Canada exactly the same way
Wow.
that she did.
Okay.
The husbands were here, they
Yeah.
went home, got married, and then brought them here.
Yeah.
So she had some company there, some people who understood and provided, and the people of the church were amazing
Yeah.
in helping her to get used to Canadian culture and teaching her some basic stuff and inviting her out, for coffee, or they often invited both of us out to their homes.
Yeah.
And so she was very friendly, and so she was getting to know people, and already had a great command of English.
Uh-huh.
And so the
Good.
English part was not a problem,
Good, good.
but she had to learn Canadian,
Uh,
because Canadian is not the same as British English
right.
that we spoke in India.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of assimilation was happening.
Okay.
In terms of the two of us, it was actually again not a very easy adjustment, because in some ways, my expectations were more Canadian.
Mhm.
Like I expected her to be more independent,
Mhm.
and in some ways, I think I expected her. I think the way she phrased it one day is, like, you're expecting me to be perfect,
Yeah.
to do everything perfectly,
Right.
and I can't. So after like a few weeks, and on top of that, sorry, there's one more unfortunate thing that
Yeah.
happened. About a week after she got here, her father passed away back home in India,
Oh,
very unexpectedly. He
right.
had health issues, and so compound that,
Uh-huh.
on top of everything.
Wow.
So it was not an easy adjustment, and unfortunately, I at that point, like I'm 25 years old, so I'm not really all that mature.
Mhm.
So I'm not really providing her,
Mhm.
with the kind of comfort and reassurance and so on that
Right.
she needs.
Oh.
And I'm also expecting her, to kind of catch up to snuff
Uh-huh.
like really quickly. So I remember one day, we had this very painful talk
Mhm.
where she was, shedding a lot of tears,
Yeah.
But that kind of alerted me because I honestly at that point was totally oblivious to the
Right.
fact that I was doing all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so from that point onwards, I was more considerate,
Okay.
and then she got pregnant, pretty well right away. She came in February, and we had our first one in December.
Oh,
So we
wow.
were very quick workers.
Yes.
And
Very fertile, very fertile.
so on top of all of
Right.
this, now she's also dealing with the
Yeah.
pregnancy. So there was a lot of adjustment for her right off the bat.
Mhm.
But you know what? By the grace of God, we were able to get through all this together. And my family was actually in Ontario, in this province where we're at. So they're like a 3 hour plane right away.
Mhm.
But the good news is they're always just a phone call away.
Right.
And so especially my mom and her, they talked a lot. So even if she had any questions about, cooking and that kind of stuff,
Good.
she could talk to my mom. So,
Okay.
so even though the family was not together physically, geographically,
Mhm.
she still had the close family support that she
Oh,
needed.
that's good. That's so awesome. So I hear that some of the hurdles that you and roadblocks that you encountered were just really growing pains, right? You're still young. You're now freshly married. You have a baby on the way. There's so many different things coming at you. How did you overcome them? I hear that you guys had conversations and you guys were able to talk things through, and maybe it's your pastor experience, but you hear what she's telling you, and you were able to very, it sounds like, quickly change and adapt to her to be more supportive to her. So is that what happened? Like, can you explain that a little bit more, how you were able to kind of get through that together?
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's basically what
Okay.
happened. And again, the foundation for all of this is like we both knew, even though we were going through a bit of a rough patch, we'd made a lifelong commitment to each other. So we're going to find a way to make it work
Yeah.
out. You know, and so whether it was me asking another man that I knew, hey, can you help me understand this? Or Sulojana talking to like
Right.
a woman
Yeah.
friend. However, and I can't even remember exactly how we got through it, if we even got a lot of help from
Uh-huh.
others. But we just found a way,
Okay.
to make things
Yeah.
work out. And of course, it marriage is a lifelong
Right.
process, and so there's things that you learn at that point that help you get through that.
Hmm.
But then when you get a little bit further down, now you have a baby starts growing older. Now there's more different kind of challenges.
Hmm.
So now you learn,
Yeah.
the parenting.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you start running into some differences in the way in which we were raised.
Right.
So those differences start cropping up.
Uh-huh.
Like for example, when it came to money, Slojana's family, especially her dad, was very, very strict that if you didn't have every last penny saved, you didn't buy anything.
Okay.
And that included a
Yeah.
house.
Wow.
So one of the first things that we did 3 years after, or 2 years after she moved there, is that we moved to a
Hmm.
city, and I said, we know we're buying a
Hmm.
house. And so it's like, so you got the money saved up? No. We have something here called a mortgage.
Yeah.
We're borrowing how much?
Yeah.
Okay, like so it was like, hey, don't worry, that's the way things are done here. We'll eventually pay it
Yeah.
off, blah blah blah. So those kind of differences, begin to
Uh-huh.
emerge, and so some of them, we know we can reconcile. Some of them we just have to accept because that's the way
Yeah.
things
Hmm.
are, and that's the way she is. That's the way I
Hmm.
am, and so yeah. So there's always this give and
Hmm.
take that happens, and so we're growing more and more,
Right.
together. Yeah.
And I think that's really important what you're saying right there, Jiva, is that, I hear she's had tons of resources. You guys have resources around you to help support her and you guys together as a whole. You found your Indian couples that you can relate to and you can share experiences with. She has those other two wives that also have very, very similar experiences. You have your congregation, right? Is that the right
Yeah.
term? To
Yeah.
support and really invite her in as a family and give her that large network of people. And then you have your mother a phone call away. It just,
Yeah.
I think all of the everything, the stars were aligned for her to be perfectly assimilated. Even though there were lots of struggles involved, there were also tons of resources available to her, which is what I think is amazing. But what I think is really, really important of what you were saying is that, it's a lifelong journey together. And as long as you
Yeah.
understand it's a lifelong journey, your expectations of something happening in that moment isn't so much
yeah,
an immediate expectation. You know that that's something you would like to uh, achieve, and so you have time to achieve that together. And I think that's a very
yeah,
important message to couples out there. Is a lot of times, one of the best analogies I've ever heard is I go to McDonald's, but I'm looking to order a filet mignon, and so if my husband is McDonald's, I shouldn't expect a filet mignon at him, right? So that was like the
yeah,
greatest analogy I've ever heard. Is like, you have to kind of know where you're both at, and go from there. So is that something like, how
yeah.
would you, let's get into, okay, well, let's actually, nobody knows yet. How long have you guys been married?
Okay. So we've been married
Yeah.
37 years. We just celebrated our anniversary on August the
Wow,
18th.
congratulations.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
37 years. Didn't know each
Yeah.
other but for a couple of minutes before you finally, and then a few days later you thought about it and said yes. And then had
Yeah.
this elaborate, amazing wedding in India, and then 6 months later reconnected. What happens if you wouldn't have? What happens if maybe one of you said no at that time? Is that an option?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. At that point, we would have just got the
Yeah.
broker, to
Yeah.
reboot and say, go, okay, go find
Yeah.
somebody else for us.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah.
then, what do you have as far as advice for couples? We'll start with couples who are considering marriage.
Okay. All right. So, like we have a lot of emphasis here that and even pressure people put on themselves. I got to find the right person.
Hmm.
They got to be a perfect match for me, this, that, and the other thing. And the thing is, yeah, obviously you want to find somebody to come into your life too that you know that you can spend your life with them.
Right.
But one of the things that you have to realize is that it is not so much about finding the right person as the determination to make it right with this person
Hmm.
to whom you make a commitment.
Okay.
Okay, so because you know each other's faults, obviously you're attracted to each other's
Hmm.
strengths and charm and all those kind of things, but those things don't last.
Right.
Like your
Right.
character is the most important thing.
Hmm.
And so once you know that the person that you're going to marry has that solid character,
Hmm.
and you both go in with that decision that what, no matter what comes our way,
Uh-huh.
we're going to find a way to make it work out.
Wow.
Yeah. And the good and one of the things that I tell couples, like when I was doing the marrying thing as a minister of the church,
Hmm.
always told couples, what, at the first hint of trouble,
Hmm.
ask for help,
Okay.
because this is where a lot of
Yeah.
couples don't. They try and do things on their own, or they just keep it to themselves,
Right.
and things pile up, and all of a sudden it's like a volcano. Just
Hmm.
when it explodes, it's not pretty.
Right.
Yeah. And so I always told them, what, like there may be somebody in your family that can help,
Okay.
but if at all possible, like go outside of family,
Right.
like find somebody that is an impartial third party.
Hmm.
Like if you're in a church, go to your pastor,
Hmm.
or find a counselor, somebody that can help.
Yeah.
Like don't wait too long.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I would also encourage, which is something that we do from time to time, is like go into marriage with eyes wide open
Wow. Yeah.
about the realities
Hmm.
of what life is going to be like, so that so there's no surprises, so that at the first sign of trouble, you don't start thinking, well, I don't think you love me anymore. That's why you're treating me like that.
Right.
Yeah. And so be prepared. Like don't go in a romantic haze, thinking that it's going to be always like candlelight and wine and roses all the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because when the
Yeah.
babies start coming, trust me, the candle doesn't stay lit for too long.
Right.
Okay, and roses, what are they? Okay,
They're dead over there in the corner.
they're on the corner, exactly. Yeah, so that's not going to keep you together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you need to go in. Like one of the main things that we've been teaching couples. We just finished working with a couple who sought us out and said, "Hey, we're getting married, and can you
Hmm.
can you work with us, for a few weeks and help us to prepare for it?"
Yeah.
So one of the main things we prepared them for is how to have difficult
Yep.
conversations,
Hmm.
because you all have to have them in marriage.
Yes.
And and when those conversations don't go well and conflict happens, how are you going to handle the conflict?
Uh-huh.
Right? So if you're prepared for that,
Right.
then like half the battle is over at that point, because when something comes, you're not fumbling to see, well, what do I do in this situation?
Hmm.
I wonder what he's thinking. Wonder what she's, is she thinking of leaving me because I didn't like the way that, she packed her back. Like you start misinterpreting signals and so on.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the other main thing that I would tell, which is true for people who are married as well as people considering marriage, is be prepared to forgive a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
That's great advice.
yeah, because you trust me, your spouse will mess up in one way or
Yeah.
the other. There will
Right.
be way more opportunities for forgiveness than you would care to count. And
Yeah.
the more quickly you forgive, the better off you
Mhm.
will be in your marriage.
Okay.
Like don't hold hurts within yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you get offended or something, that's what we teach people. How to
Hmm.
talk to your spouse in a way that, like, you're not attacking them, you're not
Hmm.
blaming them, but you're being
Okay.
honest with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
Okay.
as long as you learn to do that, and develop that even in your courtship period. Like,
Hmm.
don't wait till you get married. Like putting stuffing a lot of these emotions. Bring them out in the open. Find out who
Uh-huh.
this person really is. How are they going to respond? Like we used
Right.
to jokingly tell people, this was back in the days when wallpapering was popular. When a
Uh-huh.
couple got engaged, I used to tell them, before you get married, would you find a bathroom and try and wallpaper it together? And if you're both left standing after that without anybody bleeding, then you can get married.
Oh wow. That's a great exercise. Oh.
Because it requires you to, and if you've ever done any wallpapering, it never goes the way you plan it. And
Uh-huh.
so you're going to somebody's going to mess up, and see
Yeah.
how the other person responds to you messing up. Are they expecting perfection from you?
Wow.
Do they have grace for you? All of that will give you a feel for how things will be in your marriage.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Great advice. Now it's going to be a thing. You've just reopened wallpaper into the new new modern 2020 trend. That's awesome. So I do want to say, so yeah, I think a lot of times people approach relationships as like a business transaction, right? You have something I want, I have something you want. We're going to come together and make this work. But they're not thinking of it from a relationship perspective. I think something I've recently heard a lot is, if I have somebody who's working for me, who's not meeting up with their end of the bargain, who's not, doing exactly what the expectations are that I have for them in this relationship, then what do I do? Do I keep them around longer to continue messing up?
Yeah.
Or do I just, fire them and be done with it? And so I think a lot of times we're maybe it's the younger generation that's kind of going into that, like, well, if it doesn't work out, move on. There's so many plenty of fish in the sea
Yeah.
for us to go to. So what advice do you have for somebody with that type of mentality? How do we get out of that mentality that it's not a business
Yeah.
transaction, it's a lifelong?
Yeah. So I'm going to come at it from a faith perspective, because
Okay.
in the faith, especially the Christian faith, we talk about marriage as a covenant.
Hmm.
So you got to contrast the covenant with a contract. A
Okay.
contract is where there are terms,
Hmm.
and if you break those terms, yes, you can break the contract.
Hmm.
But when you get into marriage, you're entering into a covenant, and the covenant of marriage can only be broken by death.
Hmm.
Okay, and so if you go with that understanding of marriage, that you are prepared to stick it out for a
Right.
lifetime with this
Yeah.
person. And I, like, one of the things I always used to do whenever couples came and they make an appointment to say, hey, we want to see the pastor, want to get married, and I would look them straight in the eye, both of them separately, and say, are you prepared to spend the rest of your life with her? Are you prepared to spend the rest of your life with him? Yeah,
Hmm.
and like, look me in the eye and say yes, because
Hmm.
if you cannot say yes to that question, don't get
Hmm.
married. I'm not going to take you through marriage preparation or anything like that. You
Right.
need to come prepared, with that attitude, and that, because in the wedding vows, like, you're
Hmm.
promising, to be together, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, right?
Yeah.
To love and to cherish till death us do part.
Right.
And so when you go in with that attitude, then and to me, let me even phrase it a little bit more strongly. Only people who,
Hmm.
who have that attitude should get married. The
Hmm.
rest should not consider marriage, because when you get married to someone, you are making that commitment to them,
Hmm.
and they are also making that commitment to you. And so, I sometimes say, marriage is not for wings.
Right. Yep.
Marriage is not for people who say, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll find somebody else. No,
Wow.
that is not marriage. like
Right.
like whatever you do, don't get married with that attitude.
Yeah.
If you want to get married, then make sure that you're prepared to make a commitment and be a committed partner in a
Hmm.
covenant
Yeah.
relationship. Okay. The second thing that I would say to somebody like that is, have you ever considered the cost of divorce?
Hmm.
Uh, and and the thing is, the statistics are all over the place because our
Right.
divorce rate is very high in our society. And
Yeah.
it's not just the financial cost. The financial, it's unfortunate. Like I've often talked to couples and they actually don't have an idea of what the financial cost is really.
Hmm.
So you have children. You're paying, child support for the next 15 years, and those children are younger, or 20 years,
Right.
or whatever. Like, it looks like, well, the people only calculate the lawyer's fees or the legal fees, the court fees,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, no, no. That's just a very, very small portion. That's what you're spending now. But what you're going to keep on paying,
Uh-huh.
is for a long time. On top of that, what you basically think about the message that you now given your children, and especially kind of hitting it on where there are children,
Hmm.
because children immediately, start feeling insecure.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I've heard psychologists say that one of the greatest fears that children have is that their parents will not stay together.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh,
Because in a two-parent home, that's what children are used to.
right.
Then that's why when sometimes I've actually heard parents tell me this. The parents start fighting, and the kids, within earshot of the kids, or right in their presence. And
Hmm.
I've heard parents tell me the children, go to the parents and say, "You guys aren't getting divorced, are you?" Okay. See,
Wow.
so as soon as they hear you fight, that's what they're thinking, which is their
Right.
fear. And so
Oh,
now you go through, and you can tell them, mommy and daddy love you a lot. We just, don't love each
right.
other anymore. All those kind of things.
Uh-huh.
Well, there's an emotional price that the child is going to pay. And
Oh,
so you need to consider, like, do you? And I'm not trying to guilt anybody, but I'm just being very realistic, and I want you
yeah.
to ask the question, like, do I want to make a commitment to somebody, get married, have some children, and then say, okay, I don't care what happens to the kids. Kids are resilient, they'll adapt somehow. Yes,
Oh,
they are resilient and they will adapt, but emotionally they carry a wound.
right.
Yeah, and unless that wound is healed at some stage,
Yeah.
it is going to affect them for the rest of their life, and it's going to affect the
Exactly.
coming generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're like most of them, we're working with
Uh-huh.
couples who are contemplating divorce, right?
Hmm.
And they come to us like one step removed from divorce, and so some of them still think that maybe that might be an easier way to go, because even working through all this stuff is going to be a fair bit of effort. And
Hmm.
so we often stop and say, what, just stop for a moment
Right.
and consider, this is the price that you're going to pay, this is the price your spouse is going to pay, this is
Uh-huh.
the price your children are going to pay. And if you're prepared to pay that price, then I guess you can go ahead.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to pay the other price, which is, the cost of mentorship is not the big deal, but the process of going through it, making
Hmm.
things work out, so that you don't have to pay that other price. So
Hmm.
when the cost of fixing things,
Yeah.
is way less than the cost of not fixing and letting things happen,
Uh-huh.
at that point, you make the right choice. So we basically do everything in our power
Hmm.
to provide couples with a way that they can actually work things out.
Okay.
Yeah, so that they don't have to worry about, like, well, I'll tell you why I'm pretty strong on this, because I have
Uh-huh.
seen couples years after the divorce saying, you know what, I wish we hadn't gone through the divorce, because we
Oh,
see what's happened to the kids,
right.
and we kind of lost moral authority with our kids.
Uh-huh.
And then now the kids are going through a divorce because in some ways we made it let them know that we
It's
may have
okay.
let them know it's okay. If you can't get
Yeah.
along, then get a divorce. And so people often have a lot of guilt afterwards. And so
Hmm.
it's like why put yourself in a position
Yeah.
when you may have to feel that kind of guilt one day.
Uh-huh.
Instead, do everything in your power. And if you've done everything in your power, or one party says, "No way," like there's like, I just don't have the will to make it work with you, like I'm out of here, then the
Hmm.
other person's hands are tied. They can't do anything.
Right.
But
Right.
if there's a little bit of goodwill left,
Yeah.
then make it work. I'll just say one more thing here, Jasmine.
Yeah.
I had somebody come to me one time, and they were in their 40s, and they said, you know what, like, we've had like 20 years or so together, and we still got like a lot of life left,
Right.
type of thing. And so, so if we find somebody else, we can have another life together. So I said,
Mhm.
listen for 1 second. I said, let's say, okay, so you're in your 40s. Let's say the average life expectancy in Canada for a man is like, I think it's 81 and the woman is 85. This is about like a 4 year spread.
Okay.
But let's say you got another 35 years together,
Mhm.
okay? And it takes you next 2 years to work things out with your wife,
Uh-huh.
and with your husband together. In this case, the guy was the one that was talking that way. So let's say takes you a 2 year investment to get things right with your wife.
Mhm.
Okay, you already have 20 years of being together. You're going to have another 35 years together.
Right.
And yes, the last 20 years maybe they were not all great, but once you get your act together, look, you have 35 good years to look forward to
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you can
yeah,
really enjoy each other because
yeah.
you now learn how to teach each other properly.
Uh-huh.
So people have to put this in perspective,
Right.
that you still have a lot more time,
Mhm.
when you can have a great marriage together. You just have to find a way, you
Mhm.
know, whether it's through a marriage mentorship like what we do, or a prolonged period of counseling, or working it out on your own, whatever it may be.
Right.
But go with that attitude. Hey, I made a covenant for life, and only death will break us apart. And so I'm going to move heaven and earth to
Yeah.
make sure that we're going to make this marriage work.
Wow. Wow. So, but I will play devil's advocate here and I will ask, well, in a relationship where you did say there was still an ounce of hope left in there to continue moving, pushing forward and trying to make it work, but what happens when we involve abuse, whether it's substance abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional, any of the above? What happens then? How do you continue as a mentor, coach them through this, or how do you provide support in that area?
Okay, abuse is a very, very tricky thing to deal with, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And again, I will never say that there's no hope for anybody,
Hmm.
because we believe in the power of God, to
Right.
change lives. And so, people who have had a track record of abusing, have been able to turn their lives around,
Yep.
with support from their spouse and
Hmm.
so on. Excuse me, but there are also some people who will steadfastly refuse to change.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so one of the things we always tell people is you should never put your life in danger for the sake of a marriage, staying together.
Okay. Great.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and so if you know your life is in danger
Hmm.
because your husband, let's say, a lot of times it's the husbands, unfortunately, that tend to be the abusers, that are
Hmm.
violent, or unpredictable.
Right.
And so here you are, the wife and the children are like living in fear. We don't know what's going to happen today
Right.
when he walks in that door.
Exactly.
No, that's not a good situation.
Uh-huh.
So uh, again, the thing that we've often counseled is like, have a time of separation.
Hmm.
Because if for some reason the abuser tends to believe that they can somehow sweet talk their way into continuing the marriage
Hmm.
again
Hmm.
and keep on repeating this pattern,
Yep.
then you need to let them know you're serious about it. They know this, we're not going to let this pattern continue.
Right.
So now go and get the help that you need.
Okay.
And we're going to monitor that. We're going to monitor the kind of help that you're getting and how well you're sticking to it.
Hmm.
And once we have a professional counselor, whoever is certified,
Hmm.
yes, we believe that this person has done all that it takes
Right.
and they're a changed person, then at that point, we will set out some boundaries.
Right.
Because you
Oh,
have to set boundaries in those cases.
yeah.
In those cases, actually, all marriages should have boundaries, which we teach. But in a case like that, there need to be some very, very strict boundaries. And when you violate those boundaries, then
Hmm.
here's the penalty.
Okay.
And so, as long as you can come up with those parameters that everybody's willing to stick to,
Uh-huh.
then there's hope. But when one person doesn't want to change or minimizes, well, I just want to do that once in a while.
Right. It's nothing
There's
big. Yeah.
nothing wrong with me. No, in those cases, unfortunately,
Uh-huh.
there comes a point when it just cannot continue that way. And the principle that we always emphasize with people is, when you do have to choose divorce,
Hmm.
divorce has to be the lesser of two evils.
Okay.
In
Gotcha.
other words, continuing in that marriage,
Yeah.
enduring abuse, or whatever, is the worst alternative.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so divorce is not good,
Right.
but the other one
It's
is
worse.
is is, is worse.
Yes.
And when you ever come to that place, having tried everything under the sun,
Uh-huh.
to
Wow.
make
Yeah.
things right, then at that point, sadly, some marriages have to end in divorce.
Right. Okay. Awesome. That's amazing. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who can really resonate with this and hear that. I think that just that little bit that you said, the lesser of two evils. When you've determined that the lesser of two evil is divorce, then that's when you know it's the appropriate time to start really considering it. And now I'll throw you another curveball.
Okay.
What about in-laws? I think in this day and age, I think a lot of it there's a lot of heavy involvement with in-laws, and I think a lot of times it can create tension within a relationship,
Yeah.
and I've seen a lot of relationships kind of go down the wrong direction because the in-laws involvement is just there. And
Yeah.
how do you can't just say divorce your mom or divorce your dad, or or they can't say that to me. How do we
Yeah.
move forward from something like that?
Yeah. Well, we were both very fortunate in terms of like we didn't have in-law problems
Mhm.
because my in-laws, her parents, were in India and we were in Canada,
Right.
and her
So
in-laws,
lucky you.
and her in-laws, my parents, lived 2,000 miles away
Okay.
for 15
Yeah.
years, and even when we moved closer to them, we were still a 2-hour drive away.
Uh-huh.
So we never had that. But I know, like, you don't have to be physically together to have those problems.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, in India was very common that you actually lived with your
Right.
in-laws, especially the wife would move in to the husband's place,
Uh-huh.
and quite often the husband's parents were very glad because now they had somebody else to do all their work for them.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of stuff. Lots of unsolicited advice.
Mhm.
And if there's any Indian families watching, I know you guys are going, yeah, we know what that's all about. Okay, and so the thing is, yeah, that's a good point. You cannot divorce your family.
Right.
Your family's there, and you're stuck with them for better or for worse,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that you have to do rather delicately is to set some boundaries.
Uh-huh.
In terms of how much time are you going to spend, with your in-laws.
Mhm.
So, for example, Sulojana, if she was here, she will tell you she just loves spending time with my family.
Oh.
You know, because like my mom treated her like a daughter.
Yeah.
You know, and so my dad, and they were always just very very happy. She's the mother of their grandchildren. Like all this kind of stuff. So we never had any kind of
Uh-huh.
issues, in terms of in-laws. But I've also heard, situations where somebody goes on a holiday,
Mhm.
to be with their in-laws, and like it becomes very very stressful,
Yeah.
because of conversations,
Right.
like fault finding
Mhm.
and so on. And like one of the things that I would say is that if it gets to a certain point, I think there's a certain honor that you give, like
Mhm.
in my case, my parents, or Slojana giving her in-laws, like you have to honor them
Mhm.
because they're your elders and so on.
Right.
And so when they give you some advice and so on, like you don't fight them on it.
Uh-huh.
You just have to listen to them.
Okay.
That's the common courtesy. But you don't have to apply everything that you hear.
Uh-huh.
You can always thank them for it. And if they keep on insisting that you got to do things a certain way,
Mhm.
then let's say that my mom did that to
Mhm.
Sulojana. The responsibility is not hers to stand up for herself.
Right.
The responsibility is for me to stand up for my wife.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Like I need to be her
Say that
protector.
one more time, a little bit louder. I'll just put it on repeat in post-production.
So I need to protect her from that, and I need to have the guts to go to my parents,
Uh-huh.
to my mom, let's say, and say, "Mom, I know you meant really well, so I'm again going to couch it as politely as I can.
Uh-huh.
When you told Sulojana about the way that that we should be raising our children or whatever.
Mhm.
But you know what? With all due respect, you raised me very well.
Right.
Her parents raised her very well. Now we have our own family,
Uh-huh.
so we have some rules, by which like nothing is haphazard.
Yeah.
Like everything has been thought through. So we are raising our children the way that we know best,
Uh-huh.
and we appreciate your advice. But like just realize that if we follow the way that we have decided to do it,
Uh-huh.
then it's no disrespect to
Mhm.
you, It is just that that's the way that we've decided to do it for us because we are a
Right.
very different family
Exactly.
from the family in which you raised me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so, but the main thing here is who takes the responsibility for doing that.
Mhm.
Because if I let my wife have to defend herself, with your
Yeah.
mother-in-law or father-in-law,
Not gonna go well.
then I'm shirking my responsibility, and I'm allowing a wedge to
Uh-huh.
happen there that doesn't need to
Right.
happen,
Right.
right? Yeah, yeah. And obviously, if there's any in-laws watching, then please don't do that to your
Yeah.
kids, or your daughter-in-laws, like as parents, yes, you want to have your
Right.
input. And if they're doing something that is like, if they're smoking weed and the kid is right there and it's affecting
Uh-huh.
them, yes, you have to speak up,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you have to point out to them, but also realize, like the Bible talks about how a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife.
Mhm.
So, when you're marrying, you leave your parents, and parents have to accept the fact that your children aren't going to leave you
Yes. Yeah.
at that point, and so they're not your responsibility anymore. While they were under your
Yeah.
roof, yes, they were, but now they're not your responsibility anymore. So parents have to kind of deal with that separation anxiety in a
Mhm.
way, and realize
Right.
that no, your the capacity in which you parent them now
Mhm.
changes. So at one point you told them to do, and they needed to you to help tell them what to
Right.
do. But now they're an
Changes.
adult. You don't tell them what to do.
Exactly.
You know, you tell them maybe what you would do,
Uh-huh.
but what they do is entirely up to them.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't have that authority
Mhm.
anymore to tell them to do something and then expect them to just follow everything
Yeah.
slavishly,
Yeah.
because it's their unit, and you just have to give them the freedom to do that and not be offended,
Mhm.
when they don't follow what you say to them.
Exactly. Wow. Powerful. Powerful. Um, so just for the record, disclaimer, I do have a great relationship with my in-laws. And I'm very fortunate that that is the case, but it does, it's, my husband and I are from two very different backgrounds. I'm from DC, large city area, and then my husband's from the Southwest in a smaller town. And so when we came together, he and I had very similar interests, but then we also had very different, vast backgrounds. And so, him dealing with my parents, my mom more so, and my brothers versus me and his family, it was very different. But we had to really just kind of, like you said, mesh together and know that this is just what their differences are, and this is our difference, and but together, this is how we're going to raise
Yeah.
our family. And so I've been very fortunate in that we've had a very great relationship both ways. My parents, my mom, gets along really great with his parents, and so we have great
Mm.
familial relationships across the board.
Yeah.
But I see so
Yeah.
many times, often I have friends right now at that age where we're in our late 30s, and we've been married for a couple of years, but we are seeing that it's becoming a more common occurrence where, well, my mother-in-law said this, or and he didn't do this, and so I'm seeing that and hearing it a lot, and it's
Yeah.
sad to hear because I look and I go, you guys are a great couple, and this is really driving a big wedge in between, and how do they address that, and how do they move forward from that? So it's really difficult when you have somebody with so much power over your significant
Yeah.
other, still very, very heavily involved or wanting to be heavily involved. So
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we have to start a mentorship for
yeah.
in-laws, for
Yeah.
mother-in-laws.
I don't know who's paying for that, but because mother-in-law is not paying for it, but I do think that, and maybe that's a great
Yeah.
thing to maybe incorporate into your premarital training is maybe have a
Yeah.
chat with the in-laws as well. That could only
Mm,
facilitate better,
very good.
a better start to their marriage later on. So create the boundaries and
Exactly.
say, this is how, it's in-laws for dummies. It's their first time. They don't know. And they think that their child will always be their child. And that's not so much the case. So
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
So I'm just going to add one more thing to it,
Yeah.
because I started talking about the situation where you go to visit your
Yeah.
family, and if the stress becomes too much, then the next time you
Mhm.
go, you just don't stay quite as
Right.
long, because you need to
Yeah.
go, because the children need to spend time with their grandparents, and
Exactly.
you need to keep your relationship with your parents going,
Hmm.
and so but if it's not the most pleasant thing for your spouse,
Hmm.
then just say, what, we're only going to be able to stay for a week this
Yeah.
time, because the next week we're going over
Right.
there, like to our as a family, or
Uh-huh.
so on. And so it doesn't sound very unnatural.
Right.
It's not like you're saying, well, because you didn't treat us right, now we're going to cut it short by
Uh-huh.
1 week. No, you don't say that. You just make it sound like, hey, this year our vacation is going to be very
Hmm.
different, and so you limit the contact. That's all.
Nice, very nice. So before, I do have tons of questions for you still, and I know we're like already coming up on our hour, but you mentioned earlier the initial flame and the candle burning, and then eventually adding kids, adding work, adding all these other stressors in life and time, the candle starts to fizzle out. What advice do you have now for marriages and relationships that are much farther down the road, tens and 20 of years in to the relationship, to just kind of reignite?
Okay, all right. So one of the things that we teach in our mentorship is that you must start with the deepest
Mhm,
part of you, and like in our understanding of faith, we talk about human beings being a spirit and soul and body.
mhm,
Okay, so the spirit level stuff, quite often in relationships, basically comes to forgiveness. And so if you are holding some
yeah,
things, against your spouse, then like you don't have to tell them that you're forgiving them. It's a spiritual
mhm,
transactions, maybe between you
mhm,
and God, or just to say, you know what, I choose. It's a choice, by
mhm,
the way. I choose to forgive, Sulojana for what she said or what she did. And Sulojana used to say that, and she has to do this more than I do with her.
mhm,
I choose to forgive Jeeva, for for the way he ignored me. I choose to forgive Jeeva, whatever. So you have to start initially in
yeah,
your heart. Is another way that we talk about it. Is to forgive that person, and once you let that go, now when you talk to them, when you communicate with them, you know, you're not talking with and holding on to a grudge at the same time.
mhm,
Because if you're trying to resolve something, if you're trying to make things better and you're still holding a grudge against your spouse, that's an uphill
yeah,
battle. Okay. So the first thing you do is to let go of that spiritually so it's not hanging around and messing with
mhm,
you. Okay. The second thing that you have to do is to really be sensitive to each other's
mhm,
needs. Okay. So what does that mean? It's basically checking with each other all the time. Like, how are
mhm,
you doing? Like how can I make life easier for you? That type of thing. So one of the things is like it's always good to have a checkup with each other,
mhm,
and whether you do it on a daily basis. Slojan and I often try and do this on a daily
mhm,
basis. I won't say we always succeed, but we are sensitive to each other. So if the other person's not looking very
mhm,
happy, then we
yeah,
catch it like
yeah,
fairly quickly, and say, hey, there's something not right, you know, and also learn how to tell your spouse, especially sometimes we guys, we are not as sensitive as we need to be,
mhm,
so we'll miss those signals very easily.
yeah.
Even though our wife is giving us a signal, we may miss it.
It is just there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then later on she says, well, I thought I made it pretty obvious to you.
Right.
Well, obviously not, because I didn't pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if your spouse is not picking up on those signals,
Mhm,
then you need to learn how to have a conversation with them.
yeah,
So I'm going to teach something right now
okay,
that will save you a lot of trouble. And this is not rocket science. I didn't come up with this. I just learned this from other
yeah,
people. In the counselors actually call these I statements.
okay,
I as in the pronoun I.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So let's say that like I'm upset with my wife
mhm,
about something that she did, and she's going on carrying on like nothing happened.
mhm,
So I basically say to Sonia, can I talk to you for a second? Yeah, sure. What do you want to talk about? Uh, you know, when we were having that visit with our neighbors, and you remember the comment that you made about how I'm not all that good about keeping the yard clean.
mhm,
um, when you said that, I felt like belittled. I felt
okay,
a little hurt
yeah,
by what she said. She said, oh really? So obviously she was not aware of that,
right,
right? Yeah.
okay,
But do you notice how I framed it?
right,
I
yeah,
said, when you did that,
mhm,
which means I'm very clearly pointing out what she did,
mhm,
okay, then I'm not accusing her of anything.
right, Just
I'm
stating
simply
fact.
saying, say the fact,
Mhm.
and then you say it made me feel.
Okay.
So how I felt.
Yes.
Okay. So that's why it's called an I statement. So when you do that, all of a sudden your spouse will get the message.
Mhm.
But like on the other hand, let me just give you another scenario of how I could handle it.
Yeah, yeah.
Is I could just say, Soldier, get over here. Okay. What did you do that for? Well, we were out there talking to a neighbor. Did you
Yeah.
know, the way you talked about how I don't keep the yard clear?
Yeah.
Is that really true? I here bust my butt to keep it here. Like I mean, I could
Right.
just dump on her
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
and make her feel like a heel.
Yeah.
And like, is that going to change anything about her behavior?
Uh-huh.
Absolutely not,
No,
because
no.
it'll actually cut off the communication at that
Exactly.
point,
Yeah.
because she'll likely, like I'm putting her in a place where she'll either snap back at me,
Mhm.
or she'll just walk away. I don't want
Exactly.
to pick a fight with you. I can't talk to you. You're being irrational, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But now when I say, hey, Sonia, when you said that about me to our neighbors,
Yeah.
then it made me feel, oh,
Wow.
Jeeva, really? Okay, I'm so. So now we can move into, like
Yeah.
asking for forgiveness and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so if you want to keep your marriage, like going
Yeah.
and thriving, you need to be prepared to have those, kind of conversations
Uh-huh.
with each other.
Wow.
And the other thing is, like, find out what each other likes
Mhm.
to do, to have, and also find out what the other person does not like to do or have.
Mhm.
Yeah, like, so for example, if for a certain part of our marriage, like Sulojana took care of the dishes all the time,
Mhm.
so I never really went, near the dishwasher. I mean the sink rather. She was the dishwasher. And but then, so for me, one of the best things that I could do for her is to say, hey, why don't you go have a seat? I'm going to do the dishes today,
Yeah.
because that's going to take care of the burden from her, right?
Exactly.
So I'm making something light for her. I found out quite by accident that she loves to have flowers in the house
Oh.
all the time,
Uh-huh.
and so I just bought flowers one time, and the way she would and awed over them, it's like, oh, hark, she likes flowers.
Oh,
Okay.
so how many years did it take you to figure that out? Please tell me it was like 1 or 2 years and you've been doing that for 35 years.
No,
No?
unfortunately not.
Oh, I was really hoping.
Well,
Okay.
and again, because I never knew that about her.
Uh-huh.
Like, it was not like a top priority for
Yeah.
her. But once I started, when I brought her 2 weeks in a row, I was the hero.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
maybe I should do that every week from now on,
Yeah.
or every other week, or whatever it was. So the rule of thumb is, on the island, there's always a vase with some flowers in it.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So again, that's what she likes. Now, like, your spouse might like chocolate. So,
Mhm.
if you just pick up a little, bar of Hershey's once in a while,
Yeah.
then that'll make them, feel like you really value them.
Yeah.
Okay. Or whatever. Like for some people, you don't need anything. Hey, just sit and cuddle with me.
Uh-huh.
Let's watch TV together. Or, can you come for a walk with me? Can
Mhm.
we go for a bike ride with me? Can you
Mhm.
come to the gym with me? Like, quality time. Like, have you ever heard of something called the love languages?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, find out what your spouse's love language is,
Uh-huh.
and then make sure you express your love in that language.
Okay.
So if their love language is quality time,
Yeah.
then don't buy them gifts, because the gifts are not going to have the same effect.
Yeah.
But if their love language is gifts, don't just spend all the time with them, because they feel like you're smothering them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead, a nice little gift once in a while is what makes them feel
Mhm.
valued.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so
Oh,
as long as you understand that and figure that out, and these are not tough things to do.
right.
It's often the little things
Yes.
that we do that make marriage very fulfilling, and the little things that we do not do,
Mhm.
that make marriage horrible.
Right.
I often, say, we don't trip over rocks, we trip over pebbles.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's the pebbles that actually cause a lot of damage,
Yeah. Yeah.
because rocks you can see.
Right.
So, well, I don't, well, I never cheated on my wife. I've never got us in trouble. I always had a job, all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, wonderful. You avoided the rocks,
Mhm.
but how about the pebbles?
Right. Yeah.
You allowed the pebbles to accumulate.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So make sure that you don't have too many pebbles, because eventually the pile of pebbles will get high enough
Uh-huh.
that somebody's going to have a fall.
Wow, amazing. All right, Jiva. So you've offered lots of advice from beginning to later on in a relationship, and I'm sure there is so much more involved. I mean, from breakdown to breakthrough in as little as 10 weeks, guaranteed. That is very bold. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the concept behind your marriage mentorship?
Okay, very, very simple. We operate on two very foundational principles. The number one principle is that there are no such things as marriage
Hmm.
problems, but there are two people with their own problems coupled together in a marriage.
Ah,
Okay.
uh-huh.
So when you get married, like you bring with you not just, all your clothes and jewelry and all your baggage, you also bring a lot of emotional baggage with you.
Right. Yep.
The stuff that happened in your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
the things that were part of your life, maybe in the previous relationships, that didn't go over very well. There's hurts that are not resolved, traumas, whatever it may be. And so
Mm-hmm.
like you bring the sum, you're the sum total of all that you bring. And so the way that you're going to respond to something that your spouse does is out of what you already have.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's not a new problem.
Yeah.
You're responding to a new issue, maybe, but
Uh-huh.
you're responding out of what happened in the past.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so in our marriage mentorship, we spend a fair bit of time helping people, to get rid of that baggage, that
Mm-hmm.
spiritual baggage, emotional baggage. We take them through a very deep spiritual, cleansing process to remove
Mm-hmm.
them. The second part of it, which is actually ties in with it, is what I mentioned a while ago about the spirit, soul, and body.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times when people run into difficulty in a marriage, they will try and change their behavior. And you can grunt things out for a certain length of time.
Yeah.
You can actually make some changes, but they won't last if there's
Uh-huh.
stuff at the soul level. The soul is the name we give to our mind, will, and emotions. So if your thinking is not right, and you're got emotional stuff, turmoil that you're carrying on,
Mm-hmm.
still carrying over, then this external behavioral change, which is at the physical level, is not going to last.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn, like a new mindset, replace
Mm-hmm.
some old beliefs, like all men are this, all women are this, like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. So you have to deal with things at the soul level, but even when you do both two, and by the way, most counseling
Mm-hmm.
is designed to help you address things at that soul level,
Yeah.
at your mind, will, and emotions. Okay, but there's a deeper level within us, which is the spirit level.
Mm-hmm.
And the illustration that I gave you a while ago about forgiveness. So if
Right.
you don't take care of the spiritual realities, even, and this way, like I've seen this happen to me when I was pastoring. I still remember this one woman that came to me, and she said, "Pastor Jeeva, I don't know what's wrong with me, because I have seen virtually every counselor, every psychologist,
Uh-huh.
psychiatrist, everything. I do really well for 90 days
Mm-hmm.
at tops, and then everything falls apart again. What's the matter with me?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the light bulb went on. No, there's nothing the matter with you,
Mm-hmm.
but you haven't addressed things at the deeper level.
Right.
So once we helped her to identify these spiritual issues
Yeah.
that were at the root, and she had to forgive her, parents, former boyfriends, all this kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. Then all of a sudden, that started to impact her thinking process, which was now not being sabotaged by what was going on in her spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And that in turn now started to change her behavior.
Yeah.
So there's nothing holding you back. And so that's basically the key, the two keys that are behind the mentorship that we offer. And
Okay.
so what we do then is, once we take care of things at the spirit level, then what we need to do is to replace old patterns,
Mm-hmm.
because we all come into a marriage with patterns
Mm-hmm.
of resolving conflict, patterns of expressing love,
Right.
etc. But now we teach couples or financial management totally different patterns
Mm-hmm.
that they can both agree to, because otherwise I come with one pattern, you come with another pattern,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're clashing.
Exactly.
But now we both subscribe to the same pattern,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the old pattern is now gone.
Uh-huh.
And so it's never a point of contention anymore,
Right.
because you both agree to work together using this pattern.
Uh-huh.
So by the time you take out the spirit soul kind of hurts, and you replace the old patterns with new ones, the behavior starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
So couples come to us, they don't look at each other.
Mhm.
And some of them don't even touch each other. I remember one couple saying to us, we've actually been like two porcupines.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I've
you
heard
know,
roommates, but porcupine, wow.
yes, yeah, we had the roommates too, but also porcupines, which means like we just absolutely don't want to be together at all.
Wow.
Separate bedrooms, the whole works,
Uh,
because we just hurt each other whenever we're together.
yeah.
By the time they go through the like, usually it's 10 weeks, sometimes maybe a little bit longer.
Mhm.
But by the time they're finished with us, they're holding hands, they're hugging each
Oh,
other, they're looking into each other's eyes,
yeah.
like total turnaround.
Right.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
that's basically how our process works.
Okay, okay. Now I know you're coming from this with a lot of experience with your pastor life and then bringing together the experience of just having an arranged marriage and learning how to work through that. So you're bringing your experience into this mentorship, but I'm sure that you had to overcome a lot of different things when you started your mentorship business with noticing that, not one size fits all. So every couple, every relationship has different types of deep underlying issues that need to be addressed. So how did you overcome some of those different challenges that you had when starting your business?
Okay. Yeah. So the big thing that we had to overcome when we started the whole business was like, is this thing going to work?
Hmm.
At that time we didn't have a guarantee, by the way. Like today we have a money back guarantee.
Yeah.
At
Wow.
that time, we just had an outline, a
Hmm.
framework that we believe God gave us that framework. We're actually on a flight from Toronto to Los Angeles,
Hmm.
and started getting this download: do this first, do this next, do this, and so on. Excuse me. By the time we landed in LA,
Uh-huh.
we had the framework done,
Wow.
and so we did something very unusual,
Hmm.
which our coaches encouraged us to do, which is basically they said, make a little video, explain what you're doing, but don't worry about figuring out the whole thing ahead of time.
Hmm.
Find somebody that is willing to work with you, and then as you go along, create the lessons.
Hmm.
And then you have to adapt to them, or they may bring up some things that you had not thought about, and so then create something to address that. And so that's how we got started.
Okay.
So we didn't really come with like all the answers together in a neat package.
Right.
And then at certain stages, when some of our friends heard that we were doing this, they said, "Hey, have you, heard about this particular couple that does this?
Uh-huh.
Have you gone? Do you know about this program? Do you know this book?" So we
Right.
started, learning from others,
Exactly.
and so then you get to a place where you've pretty well seen like every situation that can
Uh-huh.
come up. Even still, now people sometimes still surprise us
Uh-huh.
with the things that they come up with, but we rely totally on God.
Yeah.
We rely on the wisdom of God,
Hmm.
to help us to navigate, those tricky situations.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so now we go with total confidence
Hmm.
that, and so we made things a little bit more, maybe boil them down to a science, if you will. So we tell the couples right off the bat, here are certain things that we expect you to do every day
Uh-huh.
for the next 63 days that we're going to be working together.
Uh-huh.
And you do these things, which is essentially developing some new habits.
Right.
And you do those things and you don't get the breakthrough, you get the money back.
Hmm.
Because we're so confident
Yeah.
that because we've discovered what those habits are as we went along. And so now it's like we know that when you follow these, you will
Hmm.
get the breakthrough along with all the other things we teach, like even
Right.
some of the things that I mentioned, the I statements and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so if you continue to shout at each other, you won't get the victory.
Exactly.
But if you make these changes that we teach you along the way,
Uh-huh.
then yeah. So that's how we the situations that came up when we didn't know how to handle it.
Hmm.
We went and found somebody else that already knew how to do it,
Yep. Yeah.
and got mentored by them.
Right.
Or got their course or went to their conference or seminar or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and kept on improving
Okay.
our knowledge base and our arsenal, and yeah, and
Uh-huh.
so yeah, so that's where we are now.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So we don't always know what we don't know. So what should I have asked you that I did not ask tonight?
Oh my goodness, you threw that question at me just like that. And now I'm going to think about a question for you
Yeah.
as an answer. What did you not ask me about it? Ask me about today. Uh, I think you covered like the kind of questions that I would have expected you to ask.
Okay.
yeah. In terms of like even the last question that you asked was a very good question.
Okay.
And you asked questions that I didn't expect you to ask. Like the one about the in-laws was not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
But you brought that up. So I think you've pretty well asked all the questions
Okay.
that you need to ask. Yeah, and basically what I would want to say to any couples that are watching this
Right.
is
Hmm.
there's always hope.
Yeah.
You know, and like never put yourself in a place where you will second guess yourself down the road.
Hmm.
In other words, do everything possible, to make things right. Do everything possible to make yourself right.
Hmm.
When things are not quite right with you. So somebody's dealing with an anger problem all the time.
Right.
They get angry just like that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Your spouse can't fix that for you.
Hmm.
You are the one that has to take care of it.
Hmm.
Or you're drinking too much. Well, you go take care of it.
Right.
So become the best person that you can be,
Uh-huh.
and your marriage will change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm saying there's always hope.
Right.
Like don't give up on each other. Don't give up on yourself. And as I said earlier, the only time that it will not work out for you is when one person is totally
Right.
unwilling to change,
Exactly.
or go along with it, or has made up their mind,
Yeah.
and that they're leaving, they're going to find somebody else, whatever. But otherwise, there's always hope.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jiva. So the last question I do want to ask you is if our Comfort Kills followers would like to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Okay. So the best way is to go to our website.
Hmm.
Now, our last name is Sam.
Hmm.
And so our website is The Sams, and we're in Canada, so it's thesams.ca.
Okay.
So if you just go to thesams.ca, it gives you some information about our marriage mentorship. There's actually a free resource that you can download,
Great.
which is called, Your Marriage Can Survive a Crisis.
Uh-huh.
We put that together when coronavirus, started to happen,
Yeah. Wow.
and marriages were beginning to get into crisis mode.
Right. Yeah.
And so, if you download that, it's not a short one. It's got a few pages, but
Hmm.
it's loaded with a lot of good
Right.
wisdom and even helpful tips and strategies.
Hmm.
Apply them, and if you are in a place where like you're very close to breaking up, or you think that's the only option,
Yeah.
then you can turn to us as your last resort.
Okay.
If there's an application form, an online form that you can fill out
Uh-huh.
right then and there. Or if you have any questions, you can send us a question on the contact form,
Right.
and we will respond to you.
Right.
Or you can also contact us on, connect with us on Facebook. Is probably
Uh-huh.
the social media platform that I spend most time on.
Okay.
Facebook and LinkedIn. You can just, if you look for Jeeva Sam, you'll find it.
Okay, great, great. And for those who are listening and watching right now, you'll also find that on our website, Comfort Kills Media. I'll have it under our guest section. Look for Jeeva Sam, and then you'll be able to find all of that login information to where you can contact them as well. But Jeeva, I do really appreciate that you are offering free resources on your website to anybody who, in this very moment right now, really needs some support, but may not have the financial means or may not be sure if the next step of having actual mentorship from you is the right thing to do. But having that free resource for them to at least try and test out on their own first before
Yeah,
using you, and reaching out to you is great, because I really do think that it gives them that taste of what Jeeva Sam and wife can offer to them as far as helping them in the
yeah,
relationship. So that's really incredible. I do thank you for doing that, because I think that right now during this global pandemic, there's a lot out there going on, and I think relationships are struggling because you are now spending more time with your significant other than you've ever expected to.
hmm.
So thank you very much, and my battery's out. So at this point, I'll just have my headshot on the bottom. But no, thank you very much. And I do appreciate your time and all the information that you provided. I felt like there was so much incredible information, and I can't wait to see if you can touch the lives of one or many with what you've offered so far, and for people to reach out and really get their relationships intact.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get the message out, and that's really what we want. We want to
Yeah.
be a blessing to anybody that
Hmm.
needs what we can offer. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's our mission, is to see marriages
Okay.
transformed, lives transformed, and
Yes.
so the family saved. So yeah,
Wonderful.
so thank you for the part that you played in getting that out to us, to others. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you're an incredible resource. I'd love to one day meet your wife. I feel like I should have had my husband sitting next to me this whole time, but for sure, definitely very valuable information and very much appreciated. So I
All
thank
right, you're
you.
welcome.